Welcome to Left in the Attic. I'm Deep.
And I'm Anna. And today we're going to be deep diving into Tabor, the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, how a new proposed tax policy can hopefully help save Colorado, and the Epstein files. We'll end with a call to action.
And today we have a really special guest, Chris deGruy Kennedy, good friend of mine. He's the head of the Bell Policy Center right here in Denver.
Indeed. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Thank you.
Yeah, I know that Deep's a new dad. And Chris, I hear you have not older than a toddler. What is it like age 4? Do they?
I don't know. We call her a big kid at home.
Okay.
So yeah, but I've got a 4-year-old daughter, Lennon.
A big kid.
Yeah.
We love that.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Her name's Lennon?
Mm-hmm.
Nice. That's an amazing name.
Yep, like the Beatles.
Nice. Where did the name inspiration come from?
You know, when Kira and I met, the Beatles were among many things that we connected on, and we actually had Lennon's name before we even conceived. We just kind of had the sense that that's what we wanted to call our kid.
That's amazing. So my daughter's name is Umeed, Umeed. And my wife and I had picked out the name 8 years ago, also before she was conceived, before we were even married and stuff. So it's cool that you had like the similar concept.
Yeah.
Do you also want a daughter?
Yeah, I think we didn't have a name picked out for a boy, so had we had a boy, we were going to have to scramble.
Yeah, no, that was the same way. We really wanted the oldest girl. So my mom is like the oldest girl in the family. Harshi's the oldest. My wife is the oldest girl in her family.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something about like oldest girls like run the world. Like, have you seen like, is it Encanto?
Oh, yeah.
The Big Sister song?
Actually, I haven't seen it.
Oh my God, you need to watch it.
I sing every song.
Really?
Yeah, I had an older sister too. So like, you know, something about having the oldest child be a woman. I'm like, oh, our house is going to be set. You know? And she was
Be
born
like
around the
Louisa.
world. So that's good. My baby, she's 8 weeks old now, just got her first vaccines yesterday.
I just want to say vaccines, because I hear amongst the young moms that moms will meet like out in the wild and they kind of have to find out if they're a mom that also vaccinates their kids or not, just to like, you know, as moms try to make mom friends.
Well, and it comes up in like preschool selection too. You don't want to get into the anti-vax preschool by mistake.
Yeah.
So you have to be careful.
Yeah.
Totally.
We're a pro-vax family, but it's crazy. Even our pediatricians and stuff, they're like tiptoeing around.
Yeah.
Or like, you know, she was getting her vaccines yesterday. So one, we were already in that, you know, pro-vaccine camp. But they're like, also, if she's in pain, she can take children's Tylenol. And like the pause that we saw from the nurse and the doctor was like, oh my God. I'm like, this is
The world
crazy.
is broken.
I know, right?
Yeah. And as a former CDC scientist, this is like painful to hear. But that's great. I love that. Again, doctors, advocating, nurses, etc. I think they are the trusted providers in communities. And so I love that. They're still.
Well, Chris, if you have any other tips for me, you know, let me know.
You know, honestly, it's such a time warp that I can't remember the time that my kid was your daughter's age.
Okay.
So I'm not sure I've got the best advice right now.
Just I'll blink and we'll be.
Yeah, sleep when you can.
Yeah.
Try to eat healthy if you can. Keep up your energy because, like, she's going to need more of it every year.
Nice.
Yeah. They were actually talking like dad fitness plans, which Chris was saying is really just running around
Yes.
and playing.
Haven't been to the gym in years, but I chase my daughter and laps around the couch every night while we're pretending we're being chased by bears.
Love that.
Mm-hmm.
Anna, I think one of the takeaways for you as a single person who's dating around the world is it looks like we chose our children's names very early on with our partners. So this is obviously a first date topic for you. The next time you go on a date,
Could you
like, what's our
imagine?
child's name going to be?
Also,
Best idea.
the way you mentioned like dating around the world, I don't know what that comment was. I was like, we're mostly just dating here in Denver.
Mostly
I
just
wanted to
Denver.
say-
Just Denver.
Just
Anna
Denver.
travels a lot. She's multilingual.
Well, and actually, when I had Raya for a short time and I downloaded it when I was in Spain. And so, unfortunately, once I came back to Denver, they were just giving me matches for people in Europe. And I was like, I don't live there, though. I'm here.
Chris, if you don't know, Raya is like, it's like Bumble or Tinder, but only for like influencers.
Oh,
Okay,
I had
did
not heard of
have-
this.
She's humble bragging right now.
No. I didn't have a social media following. And when I applied to be on Raya, depending on the city you live in, they'll accept. Yeah, you have to like apply. And I just heard about it. I had a friend that was on it. You have to be recommended or have somebody vouch for you, essentially. Yeah, I tried it out. Honestly, I don't recommend it. It was low-key trash. I think Bumble is the best dating app of Raya, Hinge, and yeah, Bumble. Yeah, the algorithm is so good.
Now
See
we know.
Anna on Bumble, swipe right. Plug in the podcast. Say you left a 5-star review. Okay. Well,
That's
that was good
hilarious.
fun catching up. Let me just do a little bit more of an introduction for those who might not know who you are. So I've known Chris for a long time. Back when I was a staffer for the House Democrats, Chris was the chair of the State Affairs Committee, doing landmark policies around environmental stuff, around healthcare stuff. I think you were one of the go-to health people. And during your last term, you became Speaker pro temp. Then I went off the staff and became a lobbyist. So we worked closely together. And then after that job, you ended up as the head of the Bell Policy Center, which is like this liberal progressive think tank that thinks really in details and depths about fiscal policy and other policies. So this is going to be an episode that's all in the weeds. This is going to be an episode that we're really talking about that. But Chris, would love to hear a little bit more about yourself and how you got into this work.
Wait. Before Chris goes, don't stop the podcast yet. This will not be too in the weeds. We're going to break it down because I am not going to lie. I learned so much about Tabor today as I did my homework for this episode. So I really do. I think we're going to be the right amount in the grass, not fully in the weeds. You know what I mean? Just
I like
the
that.
right
I like
amount.
that term.
So, yeah.
Honestly,
Fair
I like
enough.
this.
Fair enough.
Anna's going to keep us fun.
Yeah, we're going to keep it fun. But yeah, Chris, I would love to hear a little bit more about you and your, I guess, origin story to.
Yeah. Well, happy to share. So I'm a lifelong Coloradan, grew up in Colorado Springs, went to college up in Boulder where I got an engineering degree, and then I started my first career as a structural engineer in Denver in 2003. And in that era, I was working as an engineer and it was fine, but didn't really excite my passions. And at the time, climate change was one of my biggest concerns and we were doing literally nothing about it. So I started getting active both in environmental causes and also with the Democratic Party in Jefferson County. And that's kind of what led me to get plugged into the campaign world. Well, in 2009, I was laid off from my engineering company. And I decided that I needed to go. I called my friend Ian Silveri, who I'd met the previous year on a state house campaign. He was working as a legislative aide at the Capitol. I said, hey, can I come shadow you at the Capitol? And he said, yeah, show up at 9, wear a suit. And I did. And he basically made me an intern for the last 2 weeks of the 2009 legislative session.
Wow.
And so in the years that followed, I ended up managing a number of state legislative races, working as a staffer at the state capitol. I was Ed Perlmutter's campaign manager for his 2014 and 2016 congressional races. And then it was during the 2016 race that I transitioned out of being his campaign manager into running for office myself. And then I served for 8 years in the state house representing Lakewood and Central Jefferson County. And as Deep mentioned before, I worked on a lot of healthcare policies, worked on a lot of fiscal policies, to the extent that the state legislature has the authority to work on fiscal policy under Tabor, which we'll get into, and a number of other things.
So I grew up in Jefferson County.
Mhm.
So just wanted to say, and also go Buffs. As soon as you're like, I went to school in Boulder, and I was like,
I had to go Rams.
because we met right after college, so we always gave each other a hard time about Buffs Rams.
We actually had this rivalry where we took you and your friends up to Fort Collins for a night, and you all took us to Boulder for a night to see which town was better. Fort Collins won, by the way. Just throwing that out there.
I don't think that was the vote. I was also going to say that I was born and raised a little bit in Fort Collins. So I also, I went to football games as wanting to be a Ram and then later as a Buff. So I do love both.
So going back to the work that you focus on as Bell Policy Center, and we're going to get into the big ballot initiative that you're passing right now.
Mm-hmm.
For the listeners that we have right now, the biggest, thing that's happening that ties Colorado and fiscal constraint is this thing called Tabor, the Taxpayer Bill of Rights.
Mm-hmm.
What's your 101 explain this to people?
Sure. So the Tabor Amendment was passed by the voters in 1992. There had been 2 failed attempts in 1988 and 1990. And then in 1992, it was the perfect storm of conservative issues where we had a lot of anti-tax sentiment, largely driven by the presidential campaign of Ross Perot. And some of the Democrats, frankly, took their eyes off of opposing Tabor at that moment, and it passed by a fairly narrow margin. Now, that's been interpreted as a populist movement that drove it to passing, but really all the evidence, and I wrote my master's thesis about why Tabor passed, shows that is not the case. It showed that it was just this perfect storm of kind of factors that made it possible. Well, what was going on, the underlying sentiment was this idea that government needed to be held more accountable to the voters. And that's a sentiment that a lot of people can appreciate. And yet at the same time, Tabor itself was a deeply insidious ballot measure that had certain things that were well known and then countless other policy impacts that were much less well known. So the things that are most well known, you get to vote on your own taxes. So this took away the authority of the state legislature, of local school boards, of any government body to raise taxes without a vote of the people. It's well known. It's a fairly popular provision. The second most well-known piece is that there's a limit on how much government can grow based on the consumer price index for inflation plus population growth. The government needs to do to keep up with the demands of the state.
Because essentially it doesn't measure productivity, right?
No,
so
not at all.
If you're growing for people. If you're growing just inflation and population, that doesn't account for innovations in technology, innovations in new companies kind of moving in here and growing the pie even larger. So essentially, Colorado's economy is growing like this, but Tabor's only growing like this.
That's exactly right. And the other thing that's part of it is we're talking about consumer prices versus the prices of things that governments have to spend money on. You may spend a certain amount of money on groceries or appliances for your house, and that's what the Consumer Price Index measures. But governments spend money on construction materials for roads and buildings. They spend money on healthcare for their employees, as well as healthcare for people that are covered through public health insurance. These things have grown consistently faster than consumer prices for the decades that have come since 1992. So what that has meant is we have this major imbalance between the needs of the state and how much money the state is allowed to keep, and we have to give back dollars to the taxpayers. That's popular. Everyone likes getting money back, but what it has meant is chronic underinvestment in our schools, major underinvestment in our healthcare infrastructure, and an inability to keep up with the needs of the state. So those are the two most well-known pieces of Tabor. There are several others. The only one I'll mention at this time is Tabor prohibits certain forms of taxation, including prohibiting graduated income taxes. It says all income must be taxed at the same rate. That means regular income, it means capital gains income, it means corporate income must be taxed at the same rate. It says the income of millionaires must be taxed at the same rate as the income of regular working people. And that has led to the economic inequality we see in the state today.
Wow. And so, yeah, it was actually great, hearing it from an expert. You wrote your master's thesis on this. We love that. But yeah, when I was reading up on Tabor today, I was thinking to myself, all right, so this tax policy is older than I am, well, by 1 year, but 33 years old, I'm 32. And I know just how much Colorado has changed in my lifetime, not just in my lifetime in the last 5-10 years. Like, for example, when I met Deep in Rhino, the only bar to go out at was Meadowlark. And now there's like a myriad, there's so many options. And so we have this old tax policy. We have the population of Colorado has grown tremendously, as well as our economy, as you guys have mentioned. Yet we are not, the thing that has fallen behind is our public services and goods like schools, roads, affordable housing, because we don't have the money via taxes to actually invest in parts of our city and our state that make Colorado a great place to live for everyone.
That's right.
Yeah, wow.
To the extent that we've mitigated the harms of Tabor, it has had other side effects. So the city of Denver is a good example. How many sales tax measures have been passed every cycle for the last number of years? That's great because Denver is stepping up to try to meet the unmet needs, trying to pick up things that state governments might otherwise do. But it has also led to a more regressive tax code in Colorado than in many other states. Because when we pay more in sales taxes and less in income taxes, that means lower and middle income people are paying more of their income, and the very wealthy are paying less of their income every year.
Okay, yes, I did read this as well. And so one thing that I was like, what? This is, the strictest like tax policy in the whole US here in Colorado. And then the second thing was, if you make, I don't know if it's $156,000 a year or less, you're paying a larger portion of your income tax in taxes than like millionaires, or like the hashtag Colorado oligarchy, if we want to, to say that for fun. But you know what I mean? I was like, wait, what? And then, okay, for the drama, y'all, I was reading about this, and they have tried to reform this tax policy because we've been unhappy about this for years. Again, as a Colorado native, I've heard the word Tabor as like a buzzword my whole life, and I really just like deep dove on it today. But they've been trying to update this tax policy. But I've heard that special interest groups basically pour millions of dollars to ensure that this doesn't actually get updated or made more equitable, because I've talked about like structural inequities, and like this is just like the perfect example of a tax policy that's like outdated, needs to be updated. And then we have, do they call it dark money actually?
Yeah, so
it gets like poured in again against it.
Some of it's dark money,
Or I don't know. I guess we'll unpack it. So I don't know. Again, this is a little bit of, I'm not trying to stir the pot.
This is part of the transition. Colorado used to be like a reddish state, then it became a purplish state, then it became a very blue state, right? So for the longest time, Democrats weren't also gung-ho about tackling Tabor because they thought it would it would be consequential for them in elections, right? That if they went after Tabor, that would do that. This hasn't been true over the last several years. I mean, since 2018, we've not only had a trifecta at the state government. We've had growing trifectas mostly at the state government. So we really haven't had a huge opportunity to tackle Tabor in the way we necessarily wanted to, except for the last, in my opinion, the last 6 years. There was some, Tabor edits and changes, if you will, in the 2000s, led by both Republicans and Democrats. Referendum C, for example. Now we're in this opportunity that, like, listen, the political landscape has changed, and we need to now do this. But in the same time, as Democrats have been winning more and more and more seats, Republicans, they didn't just like pack up their bags and go home, right? Republicans have sort of gone into the shadows and used dark money groups, namely this group called the Vance Institute and their subsidiaries and all that are most likely funded by billionaires and oligarchs in Colorado. They've turned to ballot measures, and they play defense on ballot measures to make sure we are not going after Tabor. We're not increasing property taxes. And essentially, I feel like Bell Policy Center on one end is like the liberal, progressive, good guys who are trying to pass this good policy. And then you have your arch enemies in the shadows. And in my opinion, that is kind of like this Advanced Institute group that are doing it.
Wait, so are you saying that Chris is essentially Mufasa and you have Scar? That's what I thought when you were like in the shadows.
It's pretty good.
That's what I literally visualized in, like, the
go back in the
hyenas.
shadows. Yeah. So Michael Fields is Scar, basically.
So here's the deal with Advance Colorado. They're a right-wing organization founded exclusively to work on ballot measure work. So not only are they opposing the kinds of things we're trying to do to make this a better state, they're also constantly iterating. They have filed nearly 100 different ballot initiatives at the title board this year on topics ranging from further cutting the income tax, capping fees that can be assessed by the state, putting in place mandatory minimum sentences for drug possession or auto theft, school vouchers, cracking down on immigrant communities with mandatory show me your papers laws. They are out there doing this all the time, and they have a bottomless pit of money that very likely is coming from Phil Anschutz, the richest man in Colorado.
Anschutz,
Yes.
yeah. What? Okay,
I
sorry.
know.
Okay, keep going. What?
So, I mean, we call it dark money because we don't know that for sure, but there are lots of indication that it's Anschutz, and frankly, former Republican Governor Bill Owens is Michael Fields' boss over at Advance Colorado. So we've got this deep, wealthy establishment that is very focused on trying to buy their way to public policy through ballot measures rather than working through the legislature because they can't win elections at the legislature anymore.
Wow. Okay, wait. This is just like more reason though that like we all need to be paying attention, because when I hear about groups like this that over 100 ballot measures, like they've already been like in the endless pot of money that they have, like this is why this whole idea, like I always say, like democracy is a team sport. Like we need more people playing the game who can, because we know that they're coming to work every day and they're, doing this, which I know also you're going to work every day and doing the great work at Bell Policy Center, but we need more people aware of this because I had no idea.
But for me, raising money is hard.
Yeah.
I have to dial for dollars. I have to go begging at the feet of all the foundations in Colorado to prove our worth every year. They just have to call Sugar Daddy and ask for another check and keep on funding their efforts.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is going to become the real test of, like, for the longest time, I think we've relied on the Democratic brand name and that the blue wave that we've seen in Colorado to carry us through. And I think it's really helped with election results. But we haven't really had an opportunity to organize people in such a way, organize working class people in a way to fight this money when the lines are blurred in the way they are in ballot initiatives. However, I do think there's a hopeful note. I was taking a look, we just did an episode recently that we were talking about Prop LL, and Democrats are starting to exercise their muscle about we're going to go to the voters and we're going to be asking for tax increases on people who are making over $300,000 to fund school meals. If you were to go to our colleagues or people who work in politics, I said 10, 15 years ago, they would have shot that down. They're like, never would have happened in Colorado. But we're starting to flex this muscle. Hey, we can go to ballot initiatives. We can explain to Colorado voters that this is going to happen. And as we had analyzed, like previously, Prop LL and MM didn't damage us down the ticket. It actually helped us down the ticket. LL and MM drove people to the votes. It drove progressive people, liberal people, people who wanted to feed kids by taxing rich folks. And that also led to huge union wins down ballot, more Democratic wins down ballot, led to the entire Aurora City Council flipping from far right to progressive and Democrat. So I think, it seems like you're perfectly situated right now to team yourself up for November 2026 for this fight. So I wonder, if you can kind of explain what's next and how you're going to save Colorado, essentially.
So I'll say a couple things. First of all, I don't know that Colorado is a deep blue state. I think we are a deeply anti-Trump state.
Maybe it's on a blue state instead of a deep blue state.
Fair enough. But no, I mean, here's what I would say. Like, it's true that the Democrats have been winning statewide elections. The Democrats have strong majorities in the state legislature. Local governments in many parts of Colorado are still controlled by Republicans. And I think that if Trump is not on the ballot, there are questions about how Colorado's electorate will turn out. But so far, so good. And I will say that we're in this moment where people in Colorado are tuned in. They know what's going on. And we just have to ask them the right question. And so that's what this coalition that I'm part of is doing. So I'm with the Bell Policy Center, but I'm part of a coalition that has 14 members of a steering committee called Protect Colorado's Future. They include all kinds of interests of the state, a lot of K-12 interests, affordable childcare interests, affordable healthcare interests. And we are together working on putting something on the ballot that will raise taxes on people making more than $500,000 a year and cut taxes for the other 97, 98% of Coloradans.
So this is a tax cut for the working class.
Oh, yeah.
But a tax increase for the very wealthy. But it's going to raise how much money?
We think it'll raise between $2 and $3 billion a year.
And so right now, tangibly, I think the Colorado budget's about $40 million.
It's a lot of dollars that get double counted in there because yes, roughly there.
But even with this increase in money, what can we do with it?
I think we can, first of all, replace all the federal Medicaid cuts. Yeah. We will be able to completely replace the dollars that are being taken out of the system through the hospital provider fee ratchet down that's happening and continue drawing down up to $2 billion of federal money by putting in $550 million of state money. So that's one thing we can do. The second thing we can do is we can invest $500 million in childcare programs across Colorado, building on top of the work of the tobacco tax to make sure that we have a truly universal access to childcare system in Colorado. Third, we can considerably increase our investment in K-12 education. So while we have paid off the BS factor through largely local property tax increases, we are still a far cry from fully funding K-12 education in Colorado. We're in a place where we have a teacher attraction and retention crisis. Class sizes are too big. There are not enough people that can afford to be in the teaching profession when you cannot afford to live in the communities where you work. We can give teachers a raise. We can make sure that we have one of the best education systems in the state, or in the country, I should say. So those are three things we can do. And there may be some additional things we can fund out of this measure as well.
Wow. Just the first thing that you mentioned, I mean, all three things, I think, my heart rate increased out of excitement. I just want to touch on that first one about helping to replace some of that federal funding cuts for Medicaid, because I went to a meeting earlier this year with Denver Health. They were scrambling, thinking about how they're going to make ends meet if we have those cuts happening. Because people might think, oh, Denver Health, that only serves people in Denver. But they actually found out that they serve people all across the state, because people will drive hours from other counties just to come here to Denver to receive medical care. Denver Health doesn't have enough. They need more money to continue to provide all the services. Yeah, that was just extremely heartbreaking to see leaders there scrambling of like, what can we do to help protect Coloradoans? And to think that this extra money could go into the schools. I mean, as somebody that has a kid that's going to need childcare soon, I'm sure being in our 30s, a lot of my friends are like, it's so expensive, childcare. So you just touched on so many wonderful things that, if it would be a tax break for, you said like 97 to 98% of Coloradoans.
Yeah,
and,
anyone making less than $500,000 a year will get a tax cut from our proposal. It's the vast majority of the state.
So it sounds like it's a layup almost, right? Like if you were to go to any person off the street and be like, hey, we're going to give a tax cut to 98% of people under 500K. And then with all the proceeds, we're going to fund close to universal childcare. We're going to fund K-12 schools better, and we're going to fund healthcare. Big, huge, popular issues that everybody loves. But when I talk to political circles about this, they're like, oh, it's still like such a long shot. Can you explain why it seems like a long shot to like people who are in that atmosphere?
Because it's never been done. I mean, that's why it's one of those things that there are traditional ways of doing these campaigns. And a lot of this thinking still does come out of deep purple state Colorado, which is not to say that it's wrong. I mean, you do need resources to win these campaigns. We are going to need thousands of people knocking on doors. We are going to need to raise millions of dollars. And don't get me wrong, I do think that the way people consume media has changed. And so I do think a lot of the money we spend on TV ads is wasted. But the other side is going to be spending, right? If we put this on the ballot, this is a huge threat to the wealthiest people in Colorado who are going to see their taxes go up quite a bit. They're going to pull out all the stops, and we are going to have to fight fire with fire here. And so it's the conventional political wisdom about how you run these campaigns that has made people anxious about it. Now, you can look at the efforts that have failed in past years. There've never been one quite like this, but there have been various different efforts to try to reform Tabor in different ways that have failed on the ballot for a variety of different reasons. What we've never really tried is just the straightforward thing. And that's one of the things I appreciate so much about what we're doing. This is not like Proposition HH, which unfortunately my name is tied to, property tax concept that Jared Polis's team led, that I put my name on and really wish I hadn't.
I was there for this, and it was like, oh, God.
It was a disaster. The biggest problem with that is it was not straightforward. People didn't know what it was going to do. They didn't trust what it was going to do. What we're banking on for our proposal this year, it is very straightforward. If this is your income, here's how much you pay. If your income's up here, here's how much you pay. And here's where the dollars are going to go. Straightforward, easy.
One of the things that I think is in your back pocket that's going to really help the vote for this is there's going to be a table on the ballot that will say, if you make 0 to 99, you get $200 less. If you make 99 to 150, you get $200 less in taxes. And then it's going to say, if you make over 500K, this is how much more you pay, right? And this table, though, is something that the Bell Policy Center first passed like 5 or 6 years ago. It was like Prop GG or something.
It's Prop GG in 2022, actually.
Prop GG in 2022. Yeah. So, people have been working on this for a long time, and the Bell Policy Center has been someone moving towards this. So it's cool that, it seems like we're going towards a crescendo in some way that like, hey, maybe we can finally have the Colorado that a lot of people have been fighting for a long 33 years, essentially.
Yeah. And let me drill into that for a second, because so that's actually my bill to refer Prop GG to the ballot in 2022, which I worked with my predecessor at the Bell Policy Center, Scott Wasserman.
Hey, shout out, Scott.
Scott's the best. But what happened here was we realized that with these ballot measures that say, shall taxes be raised by $1 gazillion to do A, B, and C, it was too easy to make it sound like this was going to be a cost borne by the voters across the board. And the other side is never going to tell you that it's just the millionaires paying the taxes. They're going to make it sound like this is the biggest tax increase on working families in the history of Colorado. And we realized that we can never counter that. But we had an idea that what if we just make it really obvious right there on the ballot what this looks like? Because, you read the legalese of the ballot title, it is hard to understand what that stuff means. Yeah. But if you can put transparency measures in place to help voters understand the impact of a tax policy change on families like theirs, it makes all the difference in the world. And that's really all GG did. I mean, our opponents think it's some sort of devious ploy, but the reality is we're just giving data to people. And that's what's really unique about it is the Blue Book's always had really robust data. Now this income bracket table will be on the ballot itself. And we got a good taste of this with Proposition MM, where it was a little bit different than the Prop GG requirements, but they did put a table on the ballot showing the income brackets and the impact. And the data I'm seeing shows that MM significantly outperformed its polling, showing that voters looked at that table, understood what it meant for them, understood what the dollars would mean for kids that just wanted to eat lunch at school, and they voted yes. And we're hoping they're going to do the same thing next November.
Yeah. No, honestly, I am committing myself right now to helping make this happen and mobilize people. Because my whole reinvention as a fired federal employee is to help people really get from couch to community. I think a lot of people want to take action, and people are paying attention like never before. We had 34,000 here in Denver show up for the Fight the Oligarchy, and I don't know how many thousand for the different No Kings that we've had, but I really want to see a door knocking campaign like people went out for Zoran in New York City. We need to have this all across Colorado, truly, because just hearing, again, it's a win-win situation for 97 to 98% of Coloradoans, and this Colorado has grown. It's changed. We need to change this tax policy. It needs to be updated.
So, what's interesting about this whole policy is you're talking about door knocking and we're going to have a mass movement. That's absolutely needed is, we're talking about the good things that Prop GG put in, right? They'll set this up for success. At the same time, Democrats might be regretting some of the things that they passed in the 2010s that made it harder to put things on the ballot. So in Colorado, I remember I worked at the Colorado Supreme Court, and we used to joke that the Colorado Supreme Court, that the Colorado Constitution is the ugliest constitution in the U.S. because we've amended it so many different times because it was so easy to put on amendments into the ballot and people would vote them in. Democrats, along with some moderates and Republicans, in 2010 started passing reforms to this to make it harder to put something onto the ballot and then harder to repeal something. So to get a little wonky about this is, in order for people to even vote on this in November 2026, you're going to have to put it onto the ballot. And in order to put a constitutional amendment like this on the ballot, you have to go either get a supermajority in the state House and the state Senate, which Democrats are just shy of, right? So you need some Republicans to cross over. I doubt that happens. So then you need to go get signatures. Normally in Colorado, you would just have to get a certain
125,000.
You would just have to get a certain amount of signatures statewide, but it could be concentrated in Denver and the populous areas. However, we passed an amendment that says now you have to get 2% from each state Senate district in Colorado, meaning you have to go to every single corner of the state to get 2%. And it's going to be 125,000 signatures. To put that into perspective, you usually need about 2 signatures to make sure they're valid. So you're going to have to go and get 250,000 signatures, right?
Somewhere around there, yeah. Somewhere around there.
In order for this to pass, you're going to need to also get 55% of the vote, right?
Actually, that part is not the case. So
that's right.
What Deep's referring to is Amendment 71 that passed in 2016, I believe, put in place 2 different standards. So one is, if you do anything that touches the Constitution, you need the signatures of 2% of the registered voters in all 35 Senate districts. That we are going to have to do, and we're prepared to do that with our grassroots team already. But the second piece, if you're adding language to the Constitution, you need 55% to pass. If you're just taking language out of the Constitution, you only need 50% plus 1 to pass. And our measure simply strikes one sentence out of the Constitution, one sentence out of Tabor, and that's the sentence that says all income must be taxed at the same rate. Then the tax policies themselves go into state statute. So our measure is just going to take 50% to pass, but we will need signatures from all the 4 corners of the state. And you know what? We're prepared to do that because you get that buy-in from people during that phase of the campaign. Those people turn into your door knockers in the fall and help make sure you pass the measure as well.
Yeah. No, and okay, is there something going on right now with Tabor? I mean, I know we're sitting here talking to you about Tabor, but I actually got invited to like a happy hour tonight in Boulder that was also going to talk about Tabor.
Yeah, someone from my team's presenting there actually.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
And then tomorrow I was also going to attend an info session, I think from Colorado Health Progress, on a talk on Tabor. So I was like, 3 Tabor things happening. And I'm like, is this led by y'all, or is this
Here's what I will say. Yes, we think the Bell has been a leader in the Tabor space for a long time in Colorado, but there are dozens and dozens of organizations that recognize the severity of this problem. They recognize that we will not have affordable, high-quality healthcare in Colorado until we address Tabor. They recognize that we're not going to have a first-class education system until we address Tabor. So some of these efforts are independent. Now, our group, our 14 steering committee members of our coalition, are also joined by another 40 or so organizations that have signed a statement of support as part of our larger coalition. So we're building a ton of momentum right now. But what you're talking about with Center for Health Progress is actually an independent effort that is aligned with the spirit of what we're doing, but they're working with United for a New Economy. They have a recognition of the Tabor issue that's impacting their priorities as well. And they're trying to, their focus is, they're not necessarily putting ballot measures up, but they're doing deep canvassing work. They're trying to do relational organizing work to try to help educate people about the Tabor challenge. That's their focus.
Deep canvass, the best canvassing that you're out there. It sounds like there's so many different organizations and you're part of this coalition that's doing it. I think listeners and people will want to know, how do I get involved? What are the big steps I need? Eventually, you're going to hand people clipboards and you got to go get the signatures, donate your time, your talent, your treasure. But how can people start following along? Where can they start, figuring out what to do next?
So I've got a few recommendations here. First of all, our coalition is building our website. It'll be up before the end of the year, and we'll have a place to send people to sign up directly for our program. To make sure you stay in the loop about information, I think the Bell Policy Center is a great place to start. If you go to bellpolicy.org, you can sign up for our email list. We're not going to spam you with fundraising. It's just once every 2 weeks we send out an email with our latest research and policy advocacy information. So that's a good place to get information about what's going on. But there are 3 grassroots organizing groups that are part of our coalition that are going to be driving the petition circulation program. And those are New Era Colorado, that does youth organizing. They're Great Education Colorado, that works with parents and educators to develop neighborhood teams in all the school districts across the state. And then there's the Statewide Parents Coalition, organization that does both affordable childcare advocacy, as particularly with friend and family networks of childcare, but also a lot of work with Latina communities. And so those three organizations are also great places to go to get plugged into future volunteer opportunities.
And we will link those in the show notes.
Yes. And we will also reshare whenever the website is up and ready. I would love for people to know who's in the coalition, who's partnered, and how we can support. A couple of things. I wanted to mention that signing up for information like this, awareness is the first step on the ladder of engagement. So if this at all piques your curiosity or you want Tabor to be modified and updated, then definitely sign up for the emails from Bell Policy Center. You can also raise awareness by sharing this podcast or just sharing information in general with other people. Bring it up at happy hour.
We're in a place where people don't trust people they don't know anymore. There are no authoritative news sources anymore. It is all about relationships. So it's the most uncomfortable thing in the world to ask you to bring this up with your cranky uncle at Thanksgiving. It's also the most important conversation you can have. And so we are talking about what we can do to empower our communities ahead of the holiday season so that people are ready for those uncomfortable conversations.
Orgs and lots of nonprofits right now, again, especially as we see federal funding cuts, need volunteers. They'll be, organizing events. Again, we will need people to knock doors, chat with people, do signatures, all of that. But there's also, I'm sure, other ways to plug in and support these organizations. So, again, we can help in a variety of ways. But yeah, awareness is the first step. Volunteering, time, donating money, all good things. So,
and this isn't the last conversation we want to have about this. Would love to have you keep going on, other members of your team or other members of the coalition. We'll track this along as it goes.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
You know what? That's another thing they're going to be talking about Thanksgiving besides this Tabor reform with your uncle. I think Epstein's probably going to be one of the topics of conversation that people are going to have. First off, can I just say, this is something that felt like a third rail that no one was actually going to go and do. But it's happened. I mean, I'm not sure if you've been following this news, but this last week, the Epstein files, the House voted on it, the Senate voted on it. They're going to be released. There's some caveats that the DOJ might be, redacting Trump's name and other things. But I just want to say this is a huge shout out for folks like Ro Khanna, Thomas Massie, and three other Republicans who really drove this, including Colorado's very own. I can't believe I'm about to give her due, but we need to give her due.
We got to do
Lauren Boebert,
it.
Nancy Mace, and Marjorie Taylor Greene. These three women joined Thomas Massie to be the four Republicans to join with Ro Khanna's petition to force this vote. And once it got to vote, no one wanted to be seen as voting against this thing. I can't believe I'm still doing this again. Shout out to Lauren Boebert for helping get this across the line. But, I mean, what's your takes on the situation besides, what are you going to be talking about at Thanksgiving about this?
I mean, honestly, it really is an act of courage. I think that we underestimate this to some extent, and I'm not going to give too much credit to Boebert because I think a lot of what she's done has been deeply, deeply destructive. But to stand up to Trump after he pulls you into the Situation Room to try to bully you into taking your name off the discharge petition, that did take courage to stand up. And what she and Marjorie Taylor Greene showed was that there are certain things they are going to put ahead of loyalty to Trump. And I find that incredibly encouraging about what it means for when we turn the corner into 2020 and Trump's next crazy idea comes forward. There is a little bit of a fissure there.
A little bit of a crack.
Just a little bit of a crack. And more people are going to see that maybe I need to stand up to this guy when he's doing harm to our constituents.
Yeah, 100%. And I also just wanted to say, what I thought was interesting of how everything rolled out this last week. It's Wednesday. On Monday, Trump said, if this gets passed by the Senate and the House, I'll sign it. Then Tuesday, they were going to go for votes. And I think what he thought was they're going to do some amendments. But no, everybody was just like, I vote yes, pass this thing. 427 people in the House, only one person voted no. And then all 100 senators voted yes. And now Trump has 10 days to get this bill signed. And if he doesn't sign it, I heard that, what's his name, Massey?
Thomas Massie.
Thomas Massie, who is one of the Republicans who really, again, pushed for the Epstein files to be released. He said that if Trump doesn't sign this, he's going to go on the floor of the House and read all the names on the alleged client list. So that's what's being discussed. It's coming out. But by Thanksgiving, essentially, though, regardless.
There's a lot of rich, powerful men in this country that abuse their stations of power, that have sexually assaulted and raped minors. and it's horrific. And it sounds like it's both sides of the aisle, right? You have Larry Summers, who's been part of this. Bill Clinton's appeared. His name's appeared. Other Democratic donors. Even Congresswoman Diane DeGette's name has appeared in the files
What?
as, some. I don't know the exact story here, but Logan Davis at the Colorado Times Recorder has more details about this. Like, this is someone you should be plugged in with. Hakeem Jeffries' name's come up with. Not saying that these people are involved with the devious things that happen, but you can see that this man, Jeffrey Epstein, was almost like in the center of all these rich and powerful people in terms of finance and politics. And I saw this online. I think this is the most apt comparison, is that he became like a modern day Rasputin. Like, if you're familiar with Rasputin at the end of the Nicholas's, do you know
I'm not.
Rasputin?
I have.
I mean, I'm not a scholar of Russian history, but I know
Yeah.
a little bit.
So it's like he was this man in the Russian court that, was manipulating people, had a bunch of blackmail, had all these like scandals around him, right? And it feels like this whole Epstein saga shows that the cracks that exist in that fabric, and it's just even more important that we need to, replace this stuff wholesale.
Yeah. And I did want to touch on, you said Larry Summers, who I wouldn't have just recognized known by name, but I also looked into this.
Larry
Former-
Summers, main bad guy, in my opinion, who's led to a lot of shitty economic policies all across Obama's administrations and Biden's administrations.
But former Harvard, apparently during his time as the president of Harvard, he took Epstein's jet like 3 times and allegedly emails about something about a mentee or something of his. And he still teaches at Harvard. Like, to this day, he confronted or addressed his class about the shame he was feeling of, his name being on the list and all of that. And he says, well, he's going to stay away from the public. He's going to still continue with his teaching responsibilities, in which I think a lot of students feel uncomfortable. So I also just want to throw that out there. Like, I did not know any of that. So just learning.
Yeah, I mean, I've been very familiar with Larry Summers' economic record for a long time. I think that when Obama appointed him Secretary of the Treasury, it was Geithner of the Treasury. Yeah. Summers was the chief economic something or other.
He's the one who led to the bad bailout. Shout out to a friend of the podcast, David Sirota, who has really talked about this in his book, an audio series, Meltdown. But Larry Summers really led Obama to conservative economic policy.
Yeah, it was a bad choice to appoint him, and I think that it led to sticking with a lot of traditional conservative economic orthodoxy throughout the Obama term, when Obama really had a chance to rebuild the country in a different way. And, don't get me wrong, I think he was a great president in a lot of ways, but it was really frustrating to see a lot of those choices with Summers and Geithner and some of the others that he brought in that era. But yeah, these new revelations about Summers are deeply disturbing. I think that just to see the looks on the faces of the women that were at the candlelight vigil they must have been outside of the U.S. Capitol, and just seeing these tears of relief that there's finally a country listening to them. And I'll admit, early on in the conversation about the Epstein files, I thought it was just more Trump bullshit, and I didn't really know what it was all about. I was wrong, and as I have learned more about it, I've learned how deadly serious all of this is. And so, being a creep doesn't come with a political party label. You can be a Dem, you can be a Republican, you can be completely disconnected from this stuff and still be a deeply corrupt person. But one of the things that I think is so interesting, they're all white men. They're all old white men.
Damn.
Every one of them who has been invoked in this scandal. And something about being privileged, something about being close to money and power has led these people to believe that the rules don't apply to them. And that has got to stop.
Power corrupts. Absolutely. You just see that.
And not only that, I do want to just say, as like I taught high school freshman and sophomore, which are 14, 15, 16, it's just, gut-wrenching to think about the age of these women, and also in the fact that they've done so much advocacy, especially in the last few weeks, to really get this, the bill passed. And it's hard to see survivors, have to be their biggest advocates. And I don't think a lot of people realize that. And not just like in this one case, but even with everything going on right now, for example, in ICE communities, I see a lot of like my Latino friends like very scared and like people speaking up. And I think this is an example of like we need everybody to speak up, not just those who are going to be affected or those who have loved ones affected. Yeah, everybody should be advocating on behalf of victims or, in all cases. So
and we're going to have to keep up the pressure because, while you're right that maybe Trump's logic was they're just going to ping pong the bill back and forth. I've also just wondered if he just thinks Bondi is going to do his dirty work for him and just redact all the stuff out of the files. I mean, what is our accountability, really? How do we know that they have released all the files?
Yeah.
Like, I have not seen a single ethical bone in Pam Bondi's body from what she's been doing as Attorney General. And so I think we're going to have to keep on the pressure to make sure we get full disclosure of what has been going on.
Well, yeah. And speaking of accountability and just the fact that we've been talking about like economics a little bit, I saw today as well that they canceled the job report for October. Like they're not going to release that at all.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, my
And that
gosh.
they're going to delay the November one until like December 16th, all because they don't want people to see the numbers because it was horrible in October. And I guess they've approximated, economists with Dow Jones and stuff, that about 60,000 jobs were lost just in October itself. We already know like over 1 million people lost their jobs from January to October. So talking about just accountability is, again, they just continue to, make things disappear, which I'm like, just because we're not measuring it or releasing it doesn't mean it didn't happen, doesn't mean it's not true. And I think when people start to fudge with the data, or in this case, the files,
It's pretty scary. I will say this. There are national nonpartisan economic organizations that are trying to gather up all the data that they can from all the sources that they can and trying to make sure that we're able to provide this data out to the world so that people do know what's going on with our economy, even if the BLS stops doing what they're supposed to do, Bureau of Labor Statistics.
great. Oh, thank you. That's good to know.
Do you want an interesting fun fact about how this room and this podcast is sort of related to these Epstein files in a way? Do you see this hat right here?
I do see that hat.
So this hat is a hat I got. That's a matching hat with Ro Khanna. Ro Khanna was the keynote speaker at the Denver Democrats Gala, and he's the one who's been really spearheading this Epstein thing. He gave such an amazing speech. You know, some Democrats were saying that they haven't felt that enthused since like Barack Obama came into town. So it's kind of cool to see like an Indian American being the first person to actually lay like a punch on Trump, an Indian American. But we got matching hats. So Ro Khanna and I have matching hats. We gave him a gift at that. It's related. But I was going to say is, Chris, we've been asking guests to bring us things to put on the wall. And I believe you actually have something to add onto this legendary wall that we have now.
I did, and yet I'm realizing I might have been a little bit too uptight and stiff about what I provided because you've got all this cute and fun stuff. But what I brought you is, I served 8 years in the State House.
Yeah.
The year that was most rewarding for me by far was 2019, which was the first year we had a Dem trifecta after several years of having a Republican Senate. I brought you the seating chart of who was in the legislature in the 2019-2020 session. I happen to have 2 copies, so it's not like I gave up a precious original or anything, but there's just, a lot of faces here and just the accomplishments that we made that session between, automatic voter registration, between carbon emission limits, between all kinds of health policy reforms, drug defelonization. I mean, it was an incredible legislative session of progress for the people of Colorado. And it's the kind of thing that gives me hope, that we can solve problems again. And so I thought this might be a good symbol for somewhere.
Anna, you want to wrap us up with a call to action?
Let's do it. Alrighty. So I just found this out last week. Therefore, this is our call to action about Kyle Clark has a word of thanks campaign. Because to be honest, like I'm in my 30s. I don't watch the news like typically,
Sorry, Kyle.
like 9 News. Yeah, sorry, Kyle.
We
But
watch you on social media, though.
And my mom watches you every night. So shout out, Mom. The younger generations aren't really watching the traditional news. I know. That was really exciting. Yeah. So, we are a fan. And I found out, though, Kyle, I was at a B Civic Summit. Kyle got an award for starting this word of thanks. It's a micro-giving campaign where every single week they highlight a Colorado nonprofit, and Kyle will match the first 50 $5 donations. And through just literally like $5 donations, they've raised over $15 million in 5 years. Is
Amazing.
incredible. That's like just shows the power of small actions. Small contributions really do add up when made by the majority of people. And we're going to need majority of people to be door knocking for Tabor soon. But that will show you like we don't all have to, again, give a bunch of time or money. If we all just give a little bit, we can really create true change. And so I would encourage you to look into this Word of Thanks micro-giving campaign. There's even like a QR code. They make it super easy to donate $5. And this week they're supporting the Arapahoe County Foundation, which is a nonprofit that supports local food banks. But every single week, it truly is like nonprofit that I'm sure if you read about, you would want to support. So I want to just encourage everybody's call to action to donate $5 this week to an organization that they care about or to the Word of Thanks campaign.
Awesome. We'll put those links in the show notes. Chris, Anna, thank you for an amazing show.
Thanks so much for inviting me.
As we're wrapping up, Left in the Attic is a podcast brought to you from an actual attic in Denver. Shout out to Jesse Broom, who's helped out with our graphics and done all this amazing stuff. Anna does our social media. I do some random tech stuff. Leave a review on Spotify, Apple, Pocket Cast, YouTube. Watch it on all 3 platforms. Send it to your mom. Send it to your friend. Do all those things. And tune in next time. Thank you.